Leesburg, Florida, is a small lakefront town about 45 miles southeast of Orlando. It claims to be the oldest city in the county, incorporated all the way back in July of 1857. No doubt, Leesburg has a lot of the southern small town charm as a lot of other similar cities. Unfortunately, it was also home to a tragedy that still leaves more questions than answers over 15 years later. This is the case of Trenton Duckett. Trenton John Duckett was born on August 10th, 2004, to Melinda Eubank and Josh Duckett. The couple started dating in high school, and Melinda would have been in her late teens when she gave birth to their son. According to Melinda's mother, Beth Eubank, Melinda was young but very dedicated to motherhood and strived to be the best mom she could be. But documents from the Department of Children and Families show some disturbing details. A DCF report from 2005 alleged that Melinda threatened to hurt Trenton if Josh didn't come over to her house. She reportedly had scars on her arm and squeezed Trenton so tight he screamed. A few days before this incident, a separate DCF review had found no concerns for the boy's safety and said the case does not meet high-risk criteria. Several more incidents were reported over the next 3 months, including one where Melinda allegedly dangled Trenton over water. She was also alleged to have threatened to kill him 4 months later. Despite all of this, Josh and Melinda went on to marry in July of 2005. The couple was living together before they got married, even though this violated a court order. I couldn't find details of the court order, but I'm assuming they were ordered to stay away from each other and not be in contact. And their troubles continued. In July of 2006, Melinda accused Josh of threatening to kill both her and Trenton. She filed a temporary restraining order, which she was granted. Workers at a child welfare agency reportedly started to doubt Josh's allegations over time because they didn't see a lot of evidence backing them up. The year before this, in June of 2005, he had signed an affidavit recanting them. However, he would later say the allegations were true and that he only signed the affidavit because he was coerced into it by Melinda's lawyer. Melinda was given psychological evaluations, but nothing was found that would preclude her from becoming a capable and loving parent. According to an article in the Washington Post, Josh and Melinda Duckett were immature teenage parents who used the boy as a pawn in their manipulative relationship. Trenton spent a large portion of his life being shuffled between his parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and foster care. And unfortunately, things were about to get worse. Trenton was last seen on August 27th, 2006, just a few weeks after his second birthday. His parents had separated yet again and were now in the process of divorcing, with the now 21-year-old Melinda gaining custody of him. There are multiple reports of events that happened that day. Some of them seem to contradict each other, though the exact times of a lot of these events aren't clear. Let's go over each of them. Around 11:30 on the morning of the 27th, Trenton and Melinda were reportedly sighted by an employee at a Wendy's in Bellevue, about 20 miles north of Leesburg. The employee, who saw the two in the restaurant's drive-thru, noticed one of Melinda's tattoos. This employee asked Melinda what her son's name was, and she presumably gave it. Melinda came back through the drive-thru about half an hour later, but Trenton wasn't with her. The employee asked her where her son was. She said he was at her grandparents' or with a babysitter. The employee couldn't remember for sure. There was another alleged sighting of Melinda at the Wendy's around 4 p.m. This time she was with another woman and 2 men. There's another report that Melinda took Trenton to a shooting range that day in the Ocala National Forest. Then she got lost and drove around the area for 8 hours. There were witness sightings of her during this time. According to the Charlie Project, the last official sighting of Trenton was when Melinda picked him up at daycare that day. It's not clear just what time Trenton was picked up or when the reported visit to the shooting range took place. Once they arrived back at their apartment, Melinda said she put Trenton to bed around 6:30 p.m. and checked on him a few minutes later. At 7 p.m., two of her friends came over and they all watched a movie together. As far as I can find, neither of these friends saw Trenton that night. Around 9 p.m., Melinda went to check on Trenton but found his crib empty. She looked for him a little bit around the apartment but couldn't find him. Around 9:20 p.m., one of her friends called 911 and handed the phone to her.
What is Trenton wearing, honey?
I don't know. He was ready for bed.
You don't know what you dressed him in before you went to bed?
He already had his shoes off and or his shirt off. No shoes.
And how long has he been gone?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I was watching a movie that was 2 hours long. I had checked on him before anyone came down to the house.
In the first few days following Trenton's disappearance, investigators believed he may have been kidnapped. There was a cut in the screen of his bedroom window, which seemed to lend credence to this theory. Melinda said that Josh, her estranged husband and Trenton's father, may be behind it. Police also looked into sex offenders in the area and searched the Ocala forest for clues. However, both of these ventures turned up nothing. Police also wondered if Trenton could have been taken to South Korea, where Melinda was born and adopted from as a baby. Investigators looked at 12,000 names on flight manifests to see if either of them had been on a flight there the weekend Trenton was last seen. Again, these searches turned up nothing. Like I mentioned earlier, Melinda initially said she thought Trenton's father was behind his disappearance. In cases of missing children, it's not uncommon for suspicion to fall on a family member. And this would happen here, but this case also has a strange connection to another one. On the night of May 11th, 1987, 11-year-old Teresa Ebyabe left her home in Mascot, Florida, to walk to a nearby convenience store. She never came home. Her body was found the next morning in a lake. She had been raped and strangled, then thrown into the water. A rookie cop named James Duckett, the only officer on patrol in the area that evening, was later convicted of her murder and sentenced to death. As of 2019, he's still on death row. As you might have been able to guess from his last name, James Duckett is the father of Josh Duckett, making him Trenton's grandfather. Even though Josh was very young when his father went to prison, he still maintained a relationship with him, and both his wife and son knew him as well. The fact that James Duckett was now associated with two missing children, one of whom later turned up murdered, is disturbing. However, no evidence was ever found that connected him to his grandson's disappearance. Josh Duckett was also briefly looked into and ruled out. But investigators weren't willing to do the same for Melinda. She was named the prime suspect not long after Trenton was last seen, when a few of his toys, pictures, and a sonogram photo were found in the trash at her apartment. Because of the Wendy's sighting on the day Trenton was last seen, police also wondered if Melinda had met up with someone and given Trenton away. I also read a quote from Josh that said it was proven the screen in Trenton's bedroom window was cut from the inside. I couldn't find this in any official sources, but during an interview we'll talk more about in a minute, a criminal profiler claimed there was no evidence Trenton had been dragged through the screen. Melinda later told police she'd received a threatening email from Josh in July of that year. But as it turned out, she had sent the email in question herself, presumably to frame him. Investigators were preparing to arrest her and charge her with fraud, hoping that if they had her in custody, they could question her further and she might tell them where Trenton was. But before they could do this, things took another tragic turn.
Where were you? Why aren't you telling us where you were that day? Why aren't you telling us and giving us a clear picture where you were before your son was kidnapped?
Because I'm not going to put those kind of details out.
Why?
Because I was told not to.
Miss Duckett, you're not telling us for a reason. What is the reason you refuse to give even the simplest facts of where you were with your son before he went missing?
On September 7th, 2006, Melinda was interviewed by Nancy Grace over the phone. The segment was pre-recorded and not set to air until later. I've never been able to find the entire video, but the transcript of the episode is available online. Link below. Based on the transcript, most of the interview seemed to go by fairly normally. But toward the end, Nancy Grace got more aggressive in her questioning of Melinda. Melinda seemed to have trouble answering basic questions, such as giving a timeline of events from the day Trenton was last seen. Grace accused her of having something to hide since she refused to take a polygraph. Melinda claimed she didn't take one because her divorce lawyer told her not to. On September 8th, the day after the interview, Melinda Duckett was found dead in her grandparents' home. She'd taken her own life. She left 3 notes behind, one for her parents, one for her grandparents, and one for the public. In the notes, she claimed she had been misunderstood by the media and that she was afraid she still wouldn't be a good mother to Trenton when he was found. Nancy Grace has been heavily criticized for this interview, with many people saying she was too harsh. She has always defended herself, noting the contradictions in Melinda's statements and the fact that police were starting to focus more on her even before the interview. Melinda's parents filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Grace. The lawsuit was later settled, with Grace and her team agreeing to establish a $200,000 trust to help find Trenton. The investigation continued, but stalled tremendously, with the loss of who police considered their prime suspect. They followed leads to the Bahamas and the Caribbean, but to no avail. At some point, they also discovered Melinda had been selling explicit photos and videos of herself online for most of Trenton's life. This line of work is obviously controversial, and investigators wondered if she'd made any enemies doing this. However, they never found a connection between the photos and videos and Trenton's disappearance. A year after Trenton was last seen, police were no closer to finding him. Whoever was responsible for his disappearance had left very little evidence behind. No DNA, no fingerprints, not even clothing scraps. At this point, they claimed they hadn't had a solid lead since the day Melinda died. They were investigating a new tip in late 2020, but haven't released any details. There have been no major updates in the case since. Before Trenton's disappearance, several workers at the Florida DCF were concerned for him and believed he might be in danger. Josh Duckett has been critical of the department, saying they didn't investigate as fully as they could have for as long as they could have. Despite these workers' concerns, the department as a whole has defended their actions, or lack thereof, saying that separating the boy from his mother permanently would have required extraordinary circumstances. So what happened to Trenton Duckett? Let's go over some theories. The first theory is that Trenton was kidnapped. This is what police believed in the early days, especially with the screen of his bedroom window being cut. However, there's very little evidence for this, including the contradictory report that the screen was actually cut from the inside. There's also no evidence that Trenton was dragged through the screen, as he likely would have left behind something like blood or clothing scraps. Melinda said the screen had been taken out, then put back in after Trenton was pulled through the open window. I have no idea how likely this is. Josh Duckett also claims his son never would have slept through something like this, as he was a very light sleeper. Melinda said in the same interview that Trenton was a heavy sleeper. There's obviously a contradiction here, so make of that what you will. The next theory is that Trenton was illegally adopted by an unknown person or persons. This is what Melinda's parents believe happened to their grandson. According to a former co-worker of Melinda's, she talked about wanting to find her birth parents in South Korea and introduce them to Trenton. However, that doesn't seem to have ever happened. And like I mentioned earlier, there's no evidence that either of them were on a flight to South Korea around the time Trenton was last seen. If someone did take Trenton, they were very sneaky about it, as obviously would be the case. The last theory is that Trenton was killed, and his body was disposed of somewhere where it hasn't been found yet. Most people speculating about this case online seem to believe Melinda was responsible for this. Some of them noted the toys and sonogram photos she threw away, and they thought it was odd that she didn't leave a suicide note for her son. Others have pointed out how easy it would be to hide a body in Florida with all the swampy areas. This does make me think of Kaylee Anthony, whose body was hidden half a mile from her home for 6 months and was already skeletal by the time it was found. Florida is very humid, and decomposition can happen rapidly. So it's easy to see how the body of a child close in age to Kaylee could also be hard to find in this region. Whatever happened to Trenton Duckett, it's been almost 2 decades, and his family still doesn't have answers. Trenton John Duckett was 2 years old when he was last seen in Leesburg, Florida on August 27, 2006. Trenton is a biracial male, Asian and white, who was 3 feet tall and 35 pounds at the time of his disappearance, with brown hair and eyes. He was last seen wearing a blue and green striped shirt and denim shorts. If alive today, he would be 18 years old. If you have any information about this case, you can contact the Leesburg Police Department at 352-787-2121.